I remember when I was 13, my mom got laid off, and by the time she was able to get on her feet, we were only able to afford living at the side of somebody's house, which was basically an old converted garage. I never forgot the place because the house was just insufferable. We were living on top of each other, there was no insulation, barely any natural light, limited cross ventilation, no views, not much natural air, and I just remember complaining incessantly about how much I couldn't stand the space. Eventually she got annoyed, and one day she belted out, "You're always drawing stuff. Instead of complaining, why don't you design a way to reduce the heat in this place?" The question sat with me, like, for real, why couldn't I design a way? That moment would become the springboard for my journey into an architecture career. As excited as I was to figure out a way to reduce the heat load and investigate issues related to materiality and affordability in the Jamaican housing market, I quickly began to realize that there were these gaping holes in the architecture industry. To be honest, it's the classism for me. The architecture industry is highly exclusive. The rich people live on the hill, the poor people live on the flats, and there are certain aspects of the country that have limited infrastructure. The dichotomy of two Jamaicas is real. Various aspects of our culture and ethnic representation is constantly played up for tourism benefit, but then these same typologies are demonized in local areas of Jamaican society. When the government is building one room, $5.1 million concrete houses, I think it's time for us to reinvestigate our notions about materiality. The project I submitted in my portfolio seeks to break negative mindsets surrounding traditional forms of architecture. Bamboo is a plentiful resource that is widely available in tropical islands, and as the flattest country on earth, the Maldives is disproportionately affected by issues related to sustainability and climate change. I figured if I could develop a series of prototypes which could be successful in a sort of worst case scenario, perhaps I could transpose the knowledge learned to other tropical environments. My affinity for using bamboo also stems from my interest in championing biophilia for use as a healing environment. Towards the end of my bachelor's degree, my mom was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. It's been well documented that urbanism is at the locus of the schizophrenic epidemic. With rapid urbanization comes a decrease in socialization and human contact with nature. This brings up questions about the role architecture plays in our mental health. While the link between these two are becoming clearer, literature on schizophrenia and the unsavory effects of poor city living are typically found separately. As a final year student in the master's program at Syracuse University, for my thesis proposal, Schizophrenic Architecture, I purport to stand in the gap between the two. Rurality has more to offer than its translocality to urbanism. Biophilic design should be made a necessary component of architecture. I think a large part of my contribution to the profession will be to develop and highlight this kind of research. For me, it's no longer about nature's place in human society, but humanity's place in nature and the intrinsic benefits that can have in preserving and maintaining our mental health. Continuing through the lens of biophilia, for the design challenge, I propose to reimagine rural spaces exploited by mining. Ultimately, I cannot change the fact that there are these glaring man-made like structures, craters everywhere. There's a traditionally held view that post-mining sites are not useful, but what if we start to sustainably reclaim their biology by exploiting them for their insular qualities? Quarantine in an abandoned quarry seeks to convolute two of the most unlikely things: quarantine and quarrying. It creates a conceptual design framework that addresses a new pandemic order by exploiting the ritual of solitude and strict governance engendered by the coronavirus pandemic. To do this, I took a subversive approach to Le Corbusier's architectural graphic standards to create what I've dubbed the graphic standards of social distancing. This combines typical dimensions of a man with data outlined by the CDC and the World Health Organization to develop a new rule of thumb for creating post-pandemic architecture. I challenged ideas of quarry restoration by designing a series of quarantines which referenced it. I am Krystol Austin. I've been pushing for honest conversations and adequate representation as a graduate ambassador and an active member of the school's DEI initiatives. I'm driven to catalyze change in the industry, and I want to sit at the profession's most transformative tables. For Gensler to recognize me, a Black Jamaican woman, as a rising talent at the beginning of my career is huge. It demonstrates that they understand that Black isn't a monolith. There's diversity in Blackness, and we all deserve a seat at the table.